Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I first saw the wolf in the sodium glow of the loading bay, a silhouette inside the transport crate, all breath and eyes. The crate was a travel model meant for a mountain lion, with reinforced mesh and a folding steel door. It looked chewed. Not just scuffed, chewed like a chain-link fence after a windstorm. The transport tech from the county sheriff's office kept his voice low, as if the animal could read lips. "It was like this when we got to the trailhead," he said. "Ripped the muzzle off in the van, bit right through his own gag." I signed for intake and felt the familiar pinch of responsibility tighten across my shoulders. My name is Rowan, Animal Care Specialist at Siskiyou Ridge Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, an 8-acre tangle of enclosures and timber framing tucked between Highway 199 and the Illinois River, closer to Cave Junction than any place a rideshare app recognizes. I'd come here for owls and otters and the quiet work of cleaning, mending, feeding. Field triage on the shoulder of a 2-lane road. Late nights with an incubator and a friendless raccoon kit. I didn't come for whatever was in that crate. The wolf stood and the crate moved as if it weighed nothing. He pressed his face to the mesh. His gums were raw and shining, his teeth bright as river stone. He had the gray-on-gray coat you see in photos from Crater Lake, blue-tinged when the light hits it, and a thin leather collar half buried in that winter fur. The tag read FWS or 9. A federal research animal, which meant someone would eventually call us, request data, and want to know how he died. I wished that thought had never crossed my mind. "Vitals?" I asked. "Elevated," the sheriff's tech said. "Was limping on the left foreleg. Pupils, didn't like the light. We tried to get him to Dr. Ames in Grants Pass, but he came to in the back and threw himself against the door. We figured." He looked at the crate again, as if it might answer for him. "You were closer." We wheeled the crate into Barn A, the carnivore building. 8 stalls, rubber floors, aluminum channels that slid shut with a clack. My co-worker, Maya, met us at the threshold in her scrub jacket and rain pants, a flashlight in her teeth, dark hair twisted into a bun that had already given up. Eli, our vet tech and the best person I know with a dart gun, set a case of sedatives on the stainless table. We do things by protocol here. Even when they barely fit, we try to make them fit. "Let's start at 6 milligrams IM, Eli said, drawing up the injection. "Ketamine with a little Midaz. Quiet him down, then we x-ray that leg. We have a new dart projector that looks like a carbine but fires compressed air. It doesn't feel like a weapon, more like a reluctant compromise the job makes you keep in a locked cabinet. Eli never misses. He sighted through the fiberglass slats at the big muscle of the wolf's haunch. The wolf never blinked. "On my mark," Eli said. 3. The dart popped and sank exactly where it should. The wolf barely reacted, as if annoyance were a memory he had misplaced. I waited for that slow softening, the breath that deepens and lengthens, pause loosening at the edge of a circle. Instead, he pressed his mouth to the steel again and bit. His gums left a wet outline on the mesh. His body shook once, a full-frame shudder like an animal throwing water after a river crossing. Then, without a sound, he hit the door. The door tore a screw out of its housing. Eli swore and grabbed a catch pole. Maya swung the stall gate and I shoved the crate through. The wolf boiled out into the space like smoke and muscle. Lip curled, but not in the way I know. A grimace that didn't read as fury so much as a misfire. He swung his head and hit the pole, caught himself, and then he was past. A blur of shoulders and breath that knocked my hip against the aluminum wall. "Gate! Gate!" Maya shouted. I pushed. My shoulders screamed. The gate stuttered on a crooked track. The wolf put a paw on the cinder block half-wall, hauled himself up it and was gone, over the back partition, through the service corridor, out the open staff door where the sheriff's tech had propped it with a rubber wedge. By the time we got outside, he was already across the gravel utility road, moving like water uphill, up through the Doug fir and big-leaf maple. I remember the smell. Snow coming in the cascades and damp cedar. I remember the feeling in my mouth like I had tasted cold iron. We found Connor, one of our handlers, big guy, calm voice, on the step outside the stall. He was sitting down because standing no longer made sense. His forearm was wrapped in a towel, quickly going dark. He tried to joke because that's what you do when your brain wants to help the others around you. He didn't even, he swallowed, didn't give me the courtesy growl. We worked by rote, because training is the thin rope bridge you trust at night. Direct pressure, elevated the arm. Checked for an arterial spray, none. Irrigated what we could see. We taped the towel until it held like a cast and hustled him into the clinic room. "Ambulance is 30 out," Maya said, looking at the radio like looking could change it. "Storm knocked the south bridge into low clearance. They're rerouting." Connor put his head back and closed his eyes. "I'm fine. Hurts like..." He caught himself. "Hurts a lot." It was 10:40 p.m. We checked his tetanus record, up to date. He smiled when I said that, because he loves doing it right and hearing it back. The wolf had taken a mouthful from the meat of the forearm. No tearing past the flexors, no shattered ulna. We irrigated again. The wound looked wrong. That's the clinical word I won't write in a chart. The edges weren't clean. The surrounding skin had a stippled rash climbing it in minutes, as if the bite had been sandpapered with heat. "Vitals?" Eli asked. "Temp 99.9 and rising," Maya said. "Pulse 110. She looked at the wall clock. "How's that possible already?" "Adrenaline," I said. "Shock." We waited for the ambulance. A Pacific storm shouldered up the valley and set the firs to whispering. At 10:56, the radio cracked with a voice we didn't know. It said, "Cave Junction dispatch requesting update. Be advised, county EMS is diverted. Multiple calls south of town. If you have private transport, recommend you use it." I looked at Eli. He looked at me. "We can take him in the van," he said. "We know that road." Connor shook his head. "And leave? With that wolf out? You'll have understaffed enclosures. I can..." He swallowed again. His pupils had edged wider. "I can manage." "Connor, do me a favor," he said. "Check the raptor house. The owls were riled when we rolled the crate past." I went alone because the clinic needed both of them. The rain arrived as a soft hiss and firmed up quickly, tapping the tin roof of Barn B in a rhythm that sounded like animal feet. I hate that roof in storms. The raptor house is a walk-through aviary, a long corridor of mews with double doors and a red light we switch on at night to keep the stress down for our nocturnal birds. The red light was off. The corridor was very still. The not-sound animals trying to know what you are. I turned on my headlamp and swept the beam down each mew. Great horned with prey yellow eyes. Barn owl pale as a paper moon. Red-tail hawk walking end to end like a metronome. Calm. Then I reached mew 6, the barred owl, and the beam found something that pulled at a thread inside my chest. The owl was at the front mesh, both hands. Talons, I know. But in this moment they looked like hands, gripping the bars, beak touching metal. There was an abrasion on the corded skin at the corner of the beak that hadn't been there during rounds. The owl pressed, and the steel sang, and for a second I thought I saw the mesh flex. "Hey," I said quietly, Back up a little. I'm not food. I'm the treat lady. Be nice. It didn't flinch at my voice. It didn't blink. I stepped closer and checked the padlock. Still on. Still sealed. The storm tripped the first breaker at 11:08. The security lights blinked. Somewhere outside, the electric fence chattered and went silent. I heard Eli shout my name across the courtyard, and in the same instant, the barred owl threw its head forward once hard, and the mesh not only flexed but popped, a bead of weld pinging onto the concrete like a dropped penny. I backed up, slow, training again. Egress routes, catch poles, leather gloves. Nothing in my head covered an owl bending metal like it was warm wire. "Rowan!" Eli yelled closer. "Rowan, we need—" The radio cut louder than a slammed door. A voice, not our dispatcher this time and not county EMS, a higher bandwidth that rides the emergency bands when everything else is busy. "Be advised, unknown zoonotic event, multiple reports across Josephine and Jackson counties. Traffic control at Redwood Highway, do not, repeat, do not, bring suspected infected to GP Med. Isolation protocols advised." The barred owl tapped the mesh with its beak. Not pecking. Tapping. Slow as a clock. I turned and ran. Back in the clinic, we retaped Connor's arm because the sweat had loosened the first wrap. His skin had flushed high across his cheekbones. His eyes were grainy with the effort not to show what he felt. We argued in the way people do when fear has crowded all the gentler words out. Me insisting a ride to the hospital was still worth it. Eli insisting we keep him here under observation until the roads were confirmed clear. Connor insisting by saying nothing at all, because silence is also a vote. We called Dr. Ames's on-call pager. We called our director, Sophia, who lives in a cedar-sided house up the access road near the water tank. We called the sheriff's office. No one picked up but voicemail except the sheriff, who did and said, "Stay put, that's an order," in a voice that made staying put sound like courage instead of surrender. At 11:30, the power went for good. Our emergency lighting came up, which is to say it did not. Thin strips of LEDs along the corridors, a flashlight beam in long drifts. We can run the whole place on a generator if we have warning. We'd had none. The inverter gave us just enough to close the toughest doors, the big steel sliders on Barn A and the double gates on the Cannet yard. I jogged out to the fence and saw the telltale orange insulator caps dark as stones. The wires sagged. The rain on my face felt like static. Coyotes sang in the timber above the property. 3 voices, then 4. I've heard them 1,000 times. Yip, yip, yip. Then the wild laughter that makes the hair on even a secular neck rise up. This was different, closer, and then suddenly everywhere, like the woods had learned to throw its voice. Sophia arrived with her headlamp bouncing, rain jacket flapping, jaw set in that practical line that had gotten us through grant applications and a cougar escape drill. She took in the situation in 20 seconds. The wound, the missing wolf, the downed fence, the radio chatter. "Okay," she said. "We go to lockdown. We divide the property into 3 zones and assign 2-person teams. No one moves alone. We deploy deterrence, not—" She stopped because she knows the word. "Not weapons." She lifted a hand anyway toward the cabinet where we keep the 12-gauge with non-penetrating rounds, the pepper spray we use on the occasional trespassing dog, the bear bangers, and air horns and flares. "We're still a sanctuary," she said, as if reminding the building. "We still try to protect life." That was the last time the night felt like something we recognized. We split. Eli and Maya took Zone 1, the clinic and Barn A. Sophia and the sheriff's tech, his name was Ryan, we learned, took Zone 2, the raptor house and small mammals. I drew Zone 3 with Connor by necessity. The Canid yard, the back corridor, the food storage shed, the path to the water tank. Connor insisted on walking. I insisted on the gurney. We compromised on a shoulder under his good arm and a pace that felt like we were underwater. "Tell me a story," he said when the path rose and his breath thinned. "Not the wolf one." I told him about the time the raccoons figured out how to open the latch to their enrichment feeder in sequence, so that the last door sprung open like applause. We made it to the shed and I pulled out dry blankets, a backup radio, a first aid kit, and a package of hand warmers, which I had always thought of as luxury, never necessity. I tucked his arm against his belly with a sling and propped him against a stack of chow bags. "I'm not going to turn into an enemy right here in the kibble," he said, half a grin. "Don't look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like I'm already gone." I tried to smile back and couldn't quite find my mouth. The radio barked. Maya's voice, quick and clipped the way it gets when she's working a problem. "Zone 1 to all. We've got motion in Barn A. Gate integrity is compromised on stall 4. It looks like the wolf hit the— No, wait, he's not in there. Rowan, did you— static. Then Eli. Correction, it's not the wolf. The foxes are in alarm. We need extra hands." We made it as fast as two people can with one pair of good legs between them. Inside Barn A, the air had a sharp smell like hot pennies. I saw why when I reached stall 4. The fox, Juniper, a rehab who'd been hit by a car and kept for permanent nerve damage, was braced in the corner, all weight low, eyes fixed on the door. The steel latch bar, 3/4-inch rod, the kind a person with a hammer couldn't bend, was bowed outward, a curved line with tension in it like the strut of a bow. "How?" I said, not to anyone in particular. "She did it in one hit," Maya said, voice flat with wonder and something else. "Bounced off like she didn't notice the impact." Eli lifted his dart projector. "I'm not shooting her," he said. If she makes it through that gap, we have to keep her from the hall. Rowan, get me the heavier catch pole. And—" He didn't finish. The fox looked past us the way animals do when the thing they care about is behind you. I turned. Connor was holding the doorframe with his good hand, chest rising too fast. The skin around his sling had mottled. He was looking back down the hallway at something in the gloom. "Did you hear that?" he asked. "I didn't hear anything," I said. "Exactly," he said. And for a heartbeat I understood. The rain had softened, not stopped, but the forest noise had blanked out. No frogs, no wind, no coyotes, no drip line on the eaves. He took a step into the corridor, and the world returned in a rush. The thin piping cry of a rabbit, the thunder of something larger in the underbrush, and a repeated sound like metal being tapped with a small, insistent hammer. "Raptor House," I said, "the Bard." Sophia's voice on the radio. "Zone 2 to all. We have staff in containment and you will not. Repeat, will not. Open the primate house for any reason. We've locked 2 volunteers inside a safety cage. They requested it. And we are moving to— Ryan, get back. Do not—" The rest drowned in a clatter I will hear when I am 90. I did something I've never done at work. I ran toward trouble instead of away. It's a cliché, but clichés start somewhere. I sprinted the yard, the beam of my headlamp shaking across puddles. The smell of wet cedar bright as a clean knife. The Raptor House door was ajar by 4 inches. The lock hung on the hasp, twisted. I pressed my ear to the gap. Inside, the tapping had stopped. The building felt like a person holding their breath. I slid through and pulled the door behind me until the latch whispered into place. The corridor was red again. Somebody had gotten the emergency lighting back on, and the light slicked across the mesh like blood on a river stone. And I thought, stop. Choose better words. I made myself say them out loud. Better words, I whispered. Red like a brake light, red like a stop sign. The barred owl stood at the front of its mew, beak to mesh just as before. The beak tip was slightly blunted now, as if it had been pushed hard against something unforgiving. It turned its head and looked at me with that impossible swivel. Birds don't have expressions. We project them. But if I were to project, I would have said the owl looked like a person trying hard to remember the word for friend. "Hey," I said. The owl struck the mesh once, tap, and then again, softer, and then it stopped tapping entirely and did a thing that bent some old rule. It stepped back and set both wings out and held them there, not to threaten, not to balance, but as if to say, "I will be very still, if you will." At the edge of my hearing, past the rain, past the building, past the property line, a sound rose like something being unsheathed very slowly. The coyotes again. A harsh, overlapping call that didn't pattern right, too much in the low register, too little joy. It came closer, and the barred owl turned its head to track it through the walls, and then, this is the part I wrote down while it was fresh, because no one believes me. The owl reached up with one foot, found the pin of the lock with its toes, and twisted. I had the sudden clarity that makes a person make a choice without sovereignty. I stepped forward and put my hand over the lock. The owl didn't strike at me. It didn't sound a threat. It slowly set its foot down. For 3 slow breaths we stood like that. Then I added a carabiner to the hasp and backed away and whispered thank you. When I came out into the yard again, Sophia was there with Ryan and 2 volunteers I hadn't seen since the afternoon shift. Leah and Hector, both in rain gear with the reflective strips that made them look like buoys washed too far upstream. Sophia's expression told me that Zone 2 had not gone well. "We lost the north gate," she said, "and we just had a bear cub in necropsy resume motion after pronounced." She spared me the word. "We resecured it. The volunteers are electing to stay inside a locked space for everyone's safety. I don't know what that means in an hour." "What about Connor?" she asked. "Clinic," I said. I stopped, because I don't lie for comfort, and because the truth felt too heavy to move around. "Let me check," I said instead. Back inside, the clinic smelled like disinfectant and damp wool. Connor sat where I had left him, but his breathing had found a new frequency, a shallow, rapid rise like a bird. He looked up as if he had to bring me into focus from far away. "I'm good," he said. And then he wasn't. One hand came up without the rest of him and struck the side of the table hard enough to make the instruments jump. He snatched the hand back to his chest, eyes wide, as if it had acted alone. "Okay," I said gently, "okay, we're going to do what we talked about." What we had talked about, whispered really, once we understood what the radio was saying, was containment. If any staff exhibited the signs we were now seeing in Connor, fever rising too fast, pupils blown, episodic involuntary movement, we had agreed to isolate that person in a way that kept them safe and the rest of us uninjured. It was the worst kind of plan, the kind built from fear that tries not to look like punishment. The only place we had with enough steel and enough field of view was the Raptor House safety vestibule, a double-doored space with plexi and mesh, and a bench where donors like to take pictures with rehabilitated birds on release day. It felt cruel, and we had run out of not cruel options. "Do you trust me?" I asked. "Always," he said, without irony. The word hit me in the sternum like a thrown ball. He stood up with my help, and we began the slow walk again, but the storm had thickened, and the property felt different, as if the geometry had shifted. Somewhere beyond the tool shed, the coyotes moved again in an arc, and something large, an elk, crashed through the far fence and then stopped, not because it had to, but as if it had decided that was the correct square on the board game. I know how that sounds. I'm just writing what happened. We locked Connor into the vestibule together, the way you secure a friend into a roller coaster seat when you are 16 and both brave and terrified. He put his hand on the plexi and I put mine on the other side. "If I get strange," he said quietly, "I want you to step back. Don't reach in. Let the safety protocols be what they're for." "You are not strange," I said, "and protocols aren't vows." He smiled, and the smile was his. Then he sat and looked at his hands, and I thought of 1,000 small mercies that had gotten us through long winters, the barn cat we didn't officially have, the thermos of chili a neighbor left at the gate, the fawn that stood when no one thought it would and wobbled straight to the forest. I am not prone to speeches, but I wanted to say out loud to someone, even if it was just the plexi, that we had not been wrong to choose this life. The storm reached its middle. Midnight. The generator finally kicked. A cough, and then a steady hum that brought a few systems back. The electrified topping wire on the outer fence, the padlock control on the primate house, the small LEDs that make the camera feeds tolerable. We saw more than we wanted to. The coyotes were at the perimeter in 4s and 5s, heads aligned not on scent, but on lines of sight, the way sight hunters align on a moving object. 2 deer stood inside the fence with their heads down. They weren't feeding. They were simply there, too still. And when they lifted their heads in the same second and looked toward the clinic with the same motion, Sophia turned off the monitor. "What is the plan?" she said, in the tone that vetoes panic. "Rowan, layout." I found my voice, and I found the map in my head. "We hold this building and the Raptor House as long as we can. We move staff who show signs into negative contact spaces. We keep the carnivores in double containment. If an enclosure fails, we don't chase. We corral with vehicles and sound. If the perimeter fails, we go to the water tank trail and follow it to the fire road. There's a Forest Service gate at the top with a manual chain. We can make it to Takilma Road if we have to." "And if the infection spreads into the forest?" Ryan asked. "It already has," I said. The next hour was a collage. We used bear bangers to push a trio of raccoons back into their pen when they tried, without the benefit of fingers to lift the latch bar. We watched a bobcat pace and then simply stop at the back of its run, as if its batteries had been removed and replaced with something colder. We watched the barred owl in Mew 6 carefully, and it watched us carefully, and nothing in either of our faces changed. The fox in stall 4 bent the latch another centimeter and then stopped, staring at the air just over my left shoulder until my neck prickled. When I looked, there was nothing there. At 1:04 a.m., something knocked on the clinic door. Not pounded, knocked. Polite as a neighbor asking to borrow sugar. Sophia looked at me, and I looked at Eli, and then Eli glanced at Maya, who, because she is better than all of us, said, "Do not open that door." And we didn't. At 1:11, the padlock on the primate house failed. We watched the icon on the screen go from green to red, and we heard Leah's voice on the radio, measured and small. "We can hold the safety cage," she said. "We have food. Don't risk the walkway. If something gets in, we'll go quiet." I started to say her name. The radio clicked off. At 1:18, Connor stood up in the vestibule and looked at his hands again and then looked at me. His eyes had widened so far the iris was a ring. He lifted one hand and pressed his palm very gently to the plexi, as if to confirm the boundary still existed. Then, with a care that still breaks me to write, he turned around, sat down again, and slid his wrists into the open containment cuffs we keep under the bench for raptor work, as if this had been our plan all along. At 1:30, the generator coughed and died. The lights went to 0 and the storm took center stage. Ryan swore softly. Sophia reached for my shoulder in the dark and squeezed once. We stood like that, listening to the fence hum fail, listening to the forest creep closer with its particular appetite for edges. I thought about nature shows that narrate predation as balance. I wondered if balance has a sound. Maybe it's just the absence of frogs. At 2 o'clock, the forest stopped testing the fence and began to enter. It started at the low corner near the riparian buffer. We heard the wire lift and the post tilt. Something large came through sideways, careful as a person turning with a couch in a narrow stairwell. I took one step toward the door and stopped. We had no plan that involved meeting whatever that was on open ground. We had fire extinguishers and sound. We had bravado, which is a tender thing, and heavy gloves. Sophia made the call I was afraid to say out loud. "We evacuate the healthy animals we can move to the interior building," she said. "We document the rest. We lock doors we never lock. We do not open enclosures if opening them puts more animals at risk. We protect people first. We will carry this, but we will live to carry it." We moved like triage nurses in a hallway crowded with gurneys. We slid the skunks into travel crates by bribery, scooped the opossum family as a unit, gently swaddled 2 red-tailed hawk juveniles who tolerated us with the offended dignity of teenagers. We could not move the deer. We could not move the bobcat without tranquilizer. We could not move the fox who had decided steel was an opinion. At 2:20, as I crossed the yard with the skunk crate, the barred owl tapped the mesh again. Just once, just enough for me to look, and then fell very still. Wings slightly lifted, eyes wide open. I realized then that aggression had never been the right word for what the animals exhibited. Maybe alignment was closer. The infection, or whatever it was, wasn't making them angry. It was making them point. Half an hour later, the clinic door creaked despite the padlock, and we braced it with a melon cart and 2 feed bags like people who've built forts as children and never lost the knack. Something pressed against it from outside. Not a crash, a pressure, like a neighbor leaning while they talk. A low sound threaded through the crack, not quite a growl, not quite a hum. Eli lifted the dart projector to his shoulder, eyes dry as chalk. I put my palm on the door and felt heat through it that didn't belong to weather. The door stopped moving. The pressure receded. The sound went with it. "Everyone," Sophia said finally, voice a whisper. "If you need 10 seconds to feel something, I highly recommend this is the time. Then we're going to move." We moved at 3 o'clock. We took the path to the water tank because the gravel road ran along the fence and the fence had become a liability. The tank sits on a knoll with a view down the valley. Black firs, the thread of the river silver when the clouds open for the moon. We left markers for ourselves, flagging tape, chalk arrows on wet timber that would vanish in the next rain. We traveled in a file like schoolchildren. Eli carried the projector and a backpack of tranquilizers we weren't sure would do anything. I carried a crate with the smaller hawk, who glared at me like I had delayed a meeting. Ryan carried the skunks without complaint and without being sprayed, which I suspect is a miracle that will cancel out some other bad luck in his life. Halfway up, we saw the elk. I say the elk as if it were alone, but there were half a dozen, cows and a spike bull, standing shoulder to shoulder on the trail where it cuts across a small swale. They weren't feeding, they weren't moving. Their heads were turned toward us in perfect synchrony, eyes reflecting our headlamps in dull green. In any other time, I would have described them as beautiful. In this time, they were a locked gate made of bone. "Easy," Sophia said softly. "To us or to them. I'm not sure." We stopped. You cannot bluff an elk. You cannot outstare them or make yourself larger than you are. You wait or you go around. Going around would take us into salal and vine maple and the kind of footing that breaks ankles. We waited. The elk waited too. Then, one at a time, they stepped off the trail in sequence, as if directed by a choreographer. They didn't flee. They simply made a space and kept their eyes on us as we passed. When we were through, they stepped back onto the trail, again in sequence, and turned their heads back to the angle they had held before. I have no explanation. I only have gratitude. We reached the water tank and rested our backs against cold steel that hummed faintly with the echo of our own presence. The sky to the west had a paler seam in it, the kind that wouldn't be dawn for hours, but made a person feel like there could be one. Sophia took out the old HF radio from the caretaker's cabinet, one of those hard case units with a whip antenna you have to angle just so, and we listened to a world we had known become a world we didn't. Roadblocks on Redwood Highway, reports of behavioral clusters near Grants Pass, a clipped announcement from a federal voice that advised isolation, advised avoiding bodies of water frequented by wildlife, advised that domestic animals should be contained indoors when possible. It did not name what we were living. It did not have a word for it yet. Ryan looked at the hawk in my crate and then at me. "What happens now?" he asked. "We keep people alive," Sophia said. "We contact who we can. We get out of the way of what we can't stop. We make sure that if this is the end of the sanctuary, it isn't the end of us." I thought of Connor, sitting with his hands in the cuffs because he wanted to be good even at the end of himself. I thought of the barred owl tapping the mesh like a drummer checking a tempo. I thought of the wolf, out there in the drainage somewhere, wearing a collar with a number, a file attached to it in a federal office, the paperwork of a life none of us understood anymore. We left a note on the water tank door in grease pencil. Humans north. Animals protected as able. It felt foolish and necessary. Then we took the fire road. The rain thinned to a mist. The forest opened around us, quiet as someone standing in the doorway of your room, watching you sleep. We made to Kilma Road at 4:10, give or take. There were no headlights. The power poles had the scorched look of a transformer event. In the distance, toward town, an orange pulse rose and fell. We turned the other way toward the smaller roads no one wastes time blocking. We walked. We did not speak more than we had to. Once, a coyote crossed in front of us at a trot, gave me a brief sideways glance, and then set its head and went on its way like a commuter late for a shift. We found a farmhouse before dawn, the kind that once had a front porch and still has the ghost of one. The door was open. The wind had done that, not a person. Inside, a pellet stove sat cold. A calendar still had April circled. No one was home. The absence had weight. We brought the animals in, set the crates near the interior wall where temperature is kindest. We hung tarps over the windows because light would eventually matter. When the light finally came, a gray-blue that made every bark and needle a slightly different note, I went outside and listened for birds. I heard one. A scrub jay, rude as ever, told me off from a low branch and met my eyes without looking past me at something I couldn't see. It felt like grace. We took inventory. People, 7, if you count me, which I do. Animals, 12 in crates and a hawk who had decided the top of the bookcase was a more appropriate perch. Food, enough for a day if we were generous. Water, the tank in the yard with a hand pump, which made my arms ache even to consider but felt like a fortune. Sophia sent a message on the HF to the frequency the federal voice had named. She said who we were. She said where we would try to be. She said the names of the staff we had and the names of the ones we had not been able to bring. And she said, please, if you find the raptor house at the Siskiyou Ridge, be kind. It was a small prayer disguised as logistics. I took first watch because I wasn't going to sleep. I sat on the porch steps that didn't exist and watched the mist lift. The wolf stood at the edge of the field about 200 yards away. I knew him by the collar and the way he held his head, too level, too still, like a surveyor. He looked at me, and I looked at him, and nothing in either of us moved. Then he turned and walked the fence line all the way to the corner and disappeared as if the world had rolled up behind him. When Connor woke, if you can call what we were doing in that thin hour waking, he was himself again for a small span. No fever, no tremor, clear eyes. He asked for water, and I gave it to him, and he drank politely like a guest. "How bad is it?" he asked. "Bad," I said. "But we're here." He nodded, as if he had suspected as much. Then he asked me to do something hard. "Take me back," he said. "What?" I said, truly not understanding. "Take me back to the sanctuary," he said. "I can't," he swallowed. "I can't be here with you and maybe become a problem you can't solve. The raptor vestibule is better. It's where I should be." "No," I said, right away, because in that moment I was not a specialist or a protocol. I was a friend. "We'll make it work here. We'll—" "Rowan," he said, and the way he said my name is going to make my throat close the day someone reads this back to me in court or in some congressional room where they want to understand how we let a wolf and a storm end a place dedicated to care. He said it like a request from one person who knows another down to the bone. "Please." Sophia listened to both of us and then did the thing leaders do when there are no right choices. She made one anyway. We left at noon, in daylight, while the forest did its best impression of benign. We moved slower. The elk were gone. The coyotes didn't show. When we reached the sanctuary, the outer fence was down in 3 places and the gate hung open like a mouth. We entered with care. We announced ourselves by name like social workers. The yard was a scatter of leaves and prints. The deer pen was empty. The bobcat lay on the perch and turned its head to watch us, ears forward. The fox stall door was open and the latch bar bent into a U with finger-width spacing. The clinic door stood, the melon cart in place. The Raptor House vestibule's plexi was smudged with handprints that were ours. The barred owl stood where I had left it, head turned, eyes calm. It tapped the mesh once when I came in, and I tapped the plexi back, the way you do when you want the universe to know you are keeping count. Connor sat on the bench and slid his hands into the cuffs again. He looked at us over his shoulder like a person checking that the photo is centered. "You lock it," he said to me. "Not because you don't trust me, because I trust you." I locked it. We stayed with him until dusk. He slept and woke and slept again. When he was awake, he was kind. He asked after the skunks. He asked if the hawk had chosen a higher perch. He asked if the calendar in the farmhouse had any funny holidays circled. He asked me to tell the raccoon story again, and I did, and he laughed at the same spot. At one point, he looked at me as if he were not entirely sure my name and said, "Better words," and I nodded as if we had decided something. When full dark came back, we pulled the heavy interior door and left a note on the plexi with a grease pencil. "We'll be back at first light. We love you. We will hold fast." I know that last sentence sounds like something on a boat. It is also what you say to a person who has put themselves behind a boundary for your sake. We slept in shifts in the clinic, not because it was comfortable, but because it had walls we knew by their imperfections. At some point in the night, the wolf returned. I did not see him, Ryan did, through the tiny window near the ceiling above the autoclave. He watched the wolf stop at the Raptor House door and stand with his nose lifted as if scenting something inside. He said the wolf did not try the handle. He said the wolf put his mouth to the edge of the door and then removed it, as if the boundary there was different than the others in his new world. Morning rose again. We walked the yard and counted the animals that would still let us count them. We set food in places where it would not feel like a trap. We checked the primate house and found the safety cage closed and 2 water bottles set neatly side by side, which is the kind of message people leave when words won't make it through a radio. We took inventory again, and this time, when Sophia said, "What now?" I had an answer that felt both impossible and true. "We keep the sanctuary," I said. "We can't keep the sanctuary," Ryan said gently. "The perimeter is down. The woods are—" "I didn't say we keep it the way it was," I said. "We keep its meaning. We make the vestibule a place for anyone like Connor who knows they need it. We leave the Raptor house open during daylight with a bell at the door and a sign in big letters, 'Safe if you want to be.' We set food where it won't train anyone to break a latch. We hold until someone with more reach can use what we've learned." "What have we learned?" Maya asked. Not because she didn't know, but because sometimes you say it out loud to make it real. "That this is not rage," I said. "That it is orientation. That it makes animals and people point at things. At us, at doors, at boundaries. And that sometimes the ones who care the most will do the containing for you." We went to the vestibule together. We opened the interior door. Connor sat up, slow and deliberate, as if the air were thicker than it had been. He smiled like a person waking from a long nap. "Hey," he said. "You came back." "Of course," I said. And if this were a story written to comfort, I'd end it there with the light kissing the top bar of the mesh and a jay yelling at us like a civic watchdog. But this is a logbook more than it is a story, and it continues. The infection, or whatever we will come to call it, when the scientists and the federal voices have enough samples and enough theories, moved through the county like weather. Towns set barricades at the bridges. Neighbors learned to call before they came to a porch, not because of politeness, though that remained, but because you needed a second to orient yourself to the shape in your doorway. Domestic animals stayed inside longer than anyone thought possible. Horses watched their owners from the far ends of paddocks with ears forward, statues with heartbeat. People with old radios found new friends. People who had always loved their places found new ways to love them that did not require ownership. The roads learned the weight of footsteps instead of tires. At the sanctuary, we made our little town. We kept the clinic and the Raptor house in one barn. We set up a bell system that we could ring from any door. A triad of tones that meant friend, help, and close the door now. We taught it to the volunteers, to the sheriff's techs who came through on their way to check other properties, to the neighbors. I'm not saying we taught it to the animals. I am saying that when the barred owl tapped the mesh in the triplet pattern we had begun to identify as friend, I felt something in the part of me that has a spine relax for the first time in days. We took turns walking to the farmhouse and back for supplies and for the hawk, who insisted on making that bookshelf its home. We stopped naming the days by the calendar and named them instead by weather. Long rain, break in the west, tree shadow morning. We made lists for whoever would find them if we had to leave in a hurry. What doors stick, which keys like to be flirted with, which animals will let you touch them when there is thunder. And we waited, not passively, but with the active patience of people who can tell you how long a kestrel can hover in one place and still call it flying. We waited for the radio to say our names, for the federal voice to become a human one, for FWS or 9's tag to ping a receiver and tell someone we exist. The day it came, 6 dawns after the wolf, was clear as glass. A helicopter beat air over the ridge, white with the striping you see on agencies that work across borders. It did not land. It circled, low enough to rattle the roofs, and a person in the open door held up a sign so we could see it through binoculars. Isolation site established. Hold position. Teams en route. They dropped a package, bright orange with a streamer, and the streamer caught on the top of the old sway-backed fir and hung there like a flag caught a day too late. We laughed, the exhausted laugh of people who have saved up relief and can't spend it all at once. We cut the streamer down with a pruning pole. We brought the package inside and opened it with all the reverence of a sacrament. Inside, satellite phone, solar panel, laminated instructions with pictures showing people in dust masks and people not in dust masks, and the difference between them, vials and swabs, and a protocol for taking samples that would not hurt the animals more than they had already been hurt by the world. A note handwritten on the back of the laminated card by whoever packed it in a hurry: "You are not alone." Here's what we have today, with the sun just past the ridge and the barred owl asleep in a posture that would give a human a chiropractor's bill. We have a building that smells like disinfectant and cedar and coffee poured into tin cups we found in a back drawer. We have a staff that has learned new definitions for patience. We have an understanding that words like wild and safe and contain are blunt tools that can nevertheless do gentle work if you hold them right. We have a wolf somewhere up the drainage with a collar that still transmits and a behavior that does not match any table in any manual I've ever read. We have a friend in a vestibule who sings under his breath when he is himself and hums in 3 notes when he is not, and somehow both songs mean stay. If you are reading this because you found our notes taped to doors and fence posts, welcome. Wash your hands in the barrel by the clinic. Speak before you turn a corner. If you feel your body trying to point at something that isn't there, say another person's name and let them say yours back until the urge passes. If you are here to learn what happened, know that there are parts of it I will never understand, parts of it I will never forgive, and parts of it I will ask you to stand very still for, because standing still is sometimes the only way to move forward without breaking what you came to save. The wolf will come at dusk on the 7th day. He will stand at the fence we mended with wire and stubbornness. He will look toward the raptor house, and because the barred owl will be awake by then, there will be a soft tap once from inside. The wolf will turn his head left and right like a person weighing a choice. He will not try the latch. He will place his paws, one after the other, on the outside of the mesh the way a child places their hands on aquarium glass. He will hold there, gently, without force, as if confirming that a boundary exists because we have chosen it together. Then he will leave the fence line and walk up the trail to the water tank, just as he did that first morning, and disappear into a forest that is not our enemy or our friend, but the larger room in which we must learn to speak more softly. We will ring the bell in 3 tones, friend. And we will set down food that does not teach an animal to approach a door, but does remind a person that kindness is a habit, not an accident. We will wait for the teams. We will keep our records. We will write down what we do not have words for, and then we will find better words. And if you ask me, years from now, how we survived those first nights, I will tell you this: we did not mistake containment for cruelty. We did not mistake alignment for anger. We did not open doors that begged to be left closed. We did not abandon the people or the animals who trusted us to choose the least harmful path when all the paths were bad. We stayed. We held fast, and we learned the shape of a new sanctuary in the dark. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.